I've only read 3 books in May, but still, this month has been crazy. Hey everyone, Fina here from Fina Reads. Welcome and welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about the books I read in May. Three books is what I read in May. I will tell you why that happened, but before we get into the why, let's talk about stats, right? We want to see how May went other than reading only 3 books. All right, let's start with the stats. So 3 books, obviously, I mentioned that already. I read 3 books in the month of May, 781 pages. That has to be my lowest month since I started Booktube, I believe. I continued 2 series, at least that's a good thing, right? I read 2 horror, 1 fantasy, although one of the horrors is a little bit a mix of everything, but I will talk about that once we get there. 1 I listened to on audio, and then I read 2 on my Kindle, although one of the Kindle books I own is a physical book, 2 self-published books, 1 trade-published books, and then I loved all 3 that I read. We're just browsing through because, you know, we have the time to talk about the books now, so we'll do that. Jumping right into my shelf control report, seeing, especially knowing that I read that little books, how my unread book pile fared in May. So I started with 1,129 books at the beginning of May. That's how I ended April. So that's how I started in May, obviously. And then I got 3 new books. So 1 was a gift by Edward, who owns the channel Grifkin. Go check him out. He does a lot of author interviews. And he received a double issue of the new book Mossed in Space by Rebecca Thorne, and he gave it away on his channel and I won. Yay! Thank you, Edward. And then 2 Kickstarters arrived that I backed, I don't know how long ago. A year maybe? I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. It has been a while ago. 1 is Michael R. Fletcher's She Dreams in Blood. I left the foil on, so sorry for the glare. And the other one is Michael Sheld's Sin Eater. Even here as well, a close-up, also foil still on. Then I got rid of 2 books from my library. I read 1 owned book, which means I ended up where I started, 1,129 books, unread books on my TBR. So, you know, at least I didn't add anything by not reading anything. Let's talk about the books, starting with the omnibus that I was talking about. This is Daniel Burnett's Nightmare Chronicles, and I read book 2, Lullaby. Well, I'll listen to it on audiobook because Adam Gold is the narrator for these stories, at least the first 3, and he does an incredible job. I love listening to him. I love listening him doing all these creepy voices and the thoughts and, you know, just everything. I mean, he is an incredible narrator, and I'm not a big audiobook fan. Like, I really have to sit down and focus on it and listen to it. I'm not going to talk about the Lullaby story in itself because it's a little bit, you know, I don't want to spoil the series if you haven't read it yet. Just know it continues to be as creepy and weird as book 1 has been. I'm still loving this whole creepy vibes and kind of craziness that is going on, because you meet people where you're like, what is going on with you guys? In general, if you don't know, the whole premise is the sun didn't come up. The last morning of May, the sun didn't come up. And we follow John as he is trying to reach his kid. And as, you know, while he's on that journey, he's meeting Maria, is I think her name. Names are terrible for me always, but I think Maria is her name. She's a waitress. And we meet a 13-year-old deaf boy as well. And those 3 go on a journey. And in Lullaby, basically that journey continues. What I also love is, even though these are relatively short, at least the first 5 books in that omnibus, they pack a punch. Like, it's not like a quick, easy read. You sit with it a little bit and you have to think a little bit about what you just read because of its weirdness, but also because of just like a little bit of the deeper themes that Daniel Burnett is talking about there. And then, if you didn't know, I did an interview with Daniel Burnett on my channel last Sunday. It's already there. Like, it's recorded at this point. It's on demand available at this point. And we talked about his new omnibus that is coming out in September. He was nice enough sending me a copy of the book that I can put on my shelves. And Daniel really hyped me up for the last book in this first arc. So volume 1 till 6 are kind of the first arc in that series. And he completely hyped me up to read the final book of it, so I want to continue slowly through the books. All right, next up, I read Women of the Weird West, which is an anthology from multiple authors, edited by Casey Griffin. There's also an interview with Casey Griffin on my channel if you want to hear more about this anthology, which is coming out in June, but also other books that Casey Griffin wrote directly, her other anthologies that she wrote. But Women of the Weird West is an anthology. about Weird West stories. What Weird West is, Casey Griffin explains that in the interview, so go check that out. I mean, as the name says, you can imagine, right? It's Western, Wild West, but with a weird angle to it, or with a diverse angle to it, or with a fantasy angle to it, or with a horror angle to it. So technically this anthology falls into the horror section, but there are a lot of fantasy elements in there as well. And I loved the mix of the stories. So this was my first real Weird West, like longer book that I've read. I've read like bits and pieces of what Casey Griffin has done before, but this was my first full end-to-end kind of exposure to the Weird West genre, if that makes sense. I was really, really impressed because it's not just what you think like cowboys. There's a lot of diversity going on, a lot of stories where, Chinese immigrants play an important role, or where Aztec culture comes into play, or, there's just a lot of stuff going on. And there are even like Kelpies all of a sudden, which I thought was so cool. There's so many different stories from so many different authors that I was just really impressed by the breadth and depth of this anthology. Just disclaimer, this was also an arc the author sent me. It's not the first that I've read by her. The reason why I said yes is because I've read her stuff before, and I know that I tend to enjoy her stuff, so that was an easy yes for me. And I'm definitely going to buy a physical copy next time I see her at an event. The one problem with anthologies like that is because it's a whole bunch of different authors, there's stuff in there that I didn't fully vibe with, that was not fully my thing. For example, there are a couple of poems in there. I'm unfortunately not a big poem girl, but the stories that I enjoyed, I really enjoyed. There were some really cool elements in there, things I haven't read before like this. And overall, just a very different, which I love, kind of anthology. Anyway, to sum it all up, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed my time with it. It was also a quick read because most of the stories are relatively short. And again, if you want to hear more about it and all the stories that are in there, Casey Griffin talks about it during the interview, and she explains a little bit more on what her goal was with the anthology as well. And then the last book that I finished in the month of May was Elizabeth Moon's Divided Allegiance, book 2 in the Sheep Farmer's Daughter, Sheep Farmer's Daughter is book 1 in the Deeds of Paxenarian series. Book 2, my goodness, I know I get my books in order. Book 1 was the February backlist book club read. Book 1 was a weird one for me because it is more of a plot-driven story. And if you've been around on the channel, you know I'm more a character-driven reader, so I'm not vibing with plot-driven stories as much. But then it ended in a way where I was sitting there, it's like, okay, now I need to know how it continues. Like that ending was really, really good. So there was something that they explained that opened up the world to a certain degree where I was really curious about what exactly it is and what she, Pax, our main character, is going to do with it. So I had to read book 2, and that took me like 2.5 weeks to get through it, even though it's just 400 and some pages. But I will tell you in a little bit why it took me forever to get through it. But one of the reasons was because it is slow paced. So book 1 was already very slow paced. Book 2 is also very, very slow paced. Still very plot driven, although we get into a little bit more detail for some of the things that are going on. But overall, it's still a very plot driven story. Again, like with book 1, I was at a point somewhere in the middle. I was at a point, it's like, this is dense, this is slow. Nothing really happened so far, but I started to really get close to Pax and her journey, her naivete, and I just wanted to know where she's going, or where the story is going. And then the ending happened, and I was completely, I was in shock. I had to put the book down and I was like, okay. So book 3 is coming. I hope in June. I hope I will find time in June to actually read it, because I have a feeling it's going to be as slow paced again, and I don't want to have another 3-book month. Just that ending completely catapulted the book into the love rating for me, and I was like, okay, this is such a fantastic series. I don't know why not more people are talking about it. It was incredible. This book in particular has a bunch of very interesting Lord of the Rings inspirations in here, but Elizabeth Moon added so much detail and so much of her own themes to it and made it her own. It is, it is really, really cool. So if you like military fantasy, definitely book 1 is great. Book 2 is a little bit less on the military side, even though she goes into a different kind of military school, but it is more about her adventure and her becoming what we learn at the end of book 1. We see her journey towards that. I'm trying not to say anything not to spoil anything. It is really cool. And then just like horsemanship is a big part in here. So if you look fantasy with horses and a lot of detail around the horses, this was really cool with that. There were some areas in it where the adventure that she was on felt a little bit like a D&D campaign where you went through dungeons and then at the end you had the big monster that you had to defeat and then you came out and everything was great again. As I said, Pax really grew near and dear to my heart, and I need to know that she's okay in book 3, and I need to know that the series will end on a good note. And then I started our backlist book club pick for May, which is Daggerspell by Catherine Kerr. And that took me a little bit for a loop. I like reading grimdark fantasy, but I need to know that I'm reading a grimdark fantasy. And then I can mentally prepare myself for some really weird shit. This one started out just like a typical 80s fantasy. And then something happened where I was like, that doesn't fit at all into this story. So it was essentially an incest scene between brother and sister. And I'm like, what is happening here? And I didn't know that. Like, that seems to be a known thing for people who, get into the Daggerspell series, and they seem to know that this is happening, and either they, don't read it because of it, or they are then prepared that this is happening. So I do not prepare myself for any books, right? Like, I go into stuff blind, especially with Backlist Book Club, and yeah, this threw me for a loop a little bit. I then decided to continue anyway, because I like the theme of reincarnation and the way Catherine Kerr to that point has shown where the story is going. And I was interested in that magic system and the characters. So I decided to continue a little bit longer to see if I want to put it down or not. This is another very dense and slow book. So it definitely, I'm like at 60% at this point. So I'm definitely not done yet by any means. But we now have a second scene that also goes into that direction, where now I'm at a point where it's like, okay, can we just not? Because the rest of the book doesn't fit that vibe. So it really throws me for a loop when I read something more like classic epic fantasy adventure. You discover the magic system, you have a little bit of, whatever is going on, like a few battles and that kind of stuff. And then something really uncomfortable happens, which again, if I read Grimdark already, I don't mind it as much because, I'm mentally prepared for that, but this just doesn't fit the voice of the book. So I'll see. Right now, I'm at a point where I'm kind of done with dense stuff, so I put it down for now. Not a full DNF yet. I just need to read something lighter and faster and more entertaining, and then I'll see if I get back to Daggerspell. You'll hear in the June wrap-up if that happened or if not. So that was my reading in May. Outside of reading, May was a very busy interview month. I already told you about Casey Griffin and Daniel Burnett. I also had an interview with Nicolette Andrews, who's a fantasy romance author of a series where I've read book 1 and 2 and loved it. I absolutely fell in love with the characters and with the were-dragon shenanigans and all that fun stuff. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely check out that interview. I had a lot of fun with Nicolette. And then I had another live with Lauren Petrozilka, also Nicolette Andrews, Stephanie K. Clemens, who joined us for a short time because she was on her way to the airport, I believe. But she was able to join us for a little bit, and Megan Haskell. And we talked about a new reading app called Yearn, which is a subscription service specifically for romantasy, romance fantasy, paranormal romance, cozy fantasy, these types of subgenres. And we just talked about the app because it's brand spanking new. They just launched it in February, so we spent a little bit of time talking about that. So if that's something you're interested in, go check that out. As if that is not already enough, I did a thing this month. I finally did a thing. If you followed some of my posts on Instagram or on YouTube, you might have seen a peek of that already, a sneak peek of that already, because the last Saturday of May, I did a training for Gloss for the Greater Los Angeles Writers Society. It's basically a group of authors, like a nonprofit that where authors can sign up for, become members for, and they do monthly meetings where they talk about different topics. So, and I was a speaker at their May meeting, and I talked about marketing for authors. I did a 2-hour training where I talked about, just like who you want to sell to and social media and a whole bunch of other things. Incidentally, I had an idea floating around in my head for a couple of months now where I was like, hey, I have all this marketing knowledge and I love talking about it. Why don't I create a newsletter for authors where I talk about like the latest marketing trends, the latest features for social media, just stuff that is happening in the marketing world, and then translate it for authors. So I took the training that I did as my catalyst for starting the newsletter. And that is now live. I will put, if you're an author and you're interested in that, I will put the link down in the description as well. The newsletter is called Reader First Marketing because I'm a reader, not an author, right? So I set up the website, I set up everything, and I already set up like a YouTube account and all that kind of stuff. I need to start posting content for it. It's all brand spanking new still. But yeah, the newsletter is pretty much ready to go. I have a bunch of information already that I want to talk about. And yeah, that took me a bit of time. So that was a lot of afternoons that I usually spend reading, just putting everything together. But that's live. And then the other reason why I was busy was, you might have seen that also on the YouTube post, is we had a fire here, like 2 streets down. I could see the fire basically out of my window, and we had to evacuate for a night because it was actually really close. And then the day after, it was such a weird situation because the wind blew into one direction and I saw the fire pass, and then the wind changed 180 and then it passed again the other direction. So we were still ready and had everything packed again and more. And we're basically waiting for the wind to change into our direction. So we had to go again. Thankfully, that didn't happen. And at this point, I believe the fire's close to out, or, there might still be a little bit, but it's not dangerous anymore. Like, it's all pretty much contained, and it's more, we watch it so nothing happens. So that's why May was just crazy. And I don't know, I'm looking forward to a couple of days off in June and just, hopefully relaxing a little bit now that some of the worst things are over and some of the biggest excitements are behind me. And now I can go hopefully into like a normal, cadence of everything. We'll see. And that would be important because for June, to talk a little bit about my June TBR, I have some chunkers that I need to get to. I have a bunch of buddy reads for big, dense fantasy books and chunkers that I need to get to. Starting with our backlist book club pick for June, which is Kate Elliott's Jaron. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it, but that's the Kate Elliott book that Nico and I are super excited about. I mean, Nico, obviously from Nico's book review, who's running the backlist book club with me, he is a big Kate Elliott fan, right? And he got me all hyped up for Kate Elliott. And out of the 4 books that I've read by her, 3 I absolutely loved. And Jaron is the one that I'm most excited about out of her backlist titles. Then I have a buddy read together with Chaz from the channel Bookish Chaz, Ian from Ian the Reader, and Kate Coy for Lions of Arasun. That's going to be my first Guy Gabriel Kay book. I am very excited because that is actually the only one from, because I've read the summaries of the more popular ones, and that was the only one that actually really interested me because it's set in medieval Spain. And I love anything medieval, and if I can get something that is different and not the UK or German medieval, but like a different country medieval, I'm all for it. So I'm excited for that one. And then the next buddy read that was actually a buddy read for May, but that I already told the whole group that I have to move it into June, is Royal Assassin. We are reading as part of the Booktube Creator Guild. If you're a booktuber, you're always welcome to join the Booktube Creator Guild, where we talk about anything analytics and everything. And then obviously I have a long list of other books that I want to get to that I didn't get to in May. Yay! Too many things to do. Woohoo! So yeah, as you can see, it's not boring over here. It's excitement, good excitement for the most part. So how was your May? What was your favorite book that you read in May? Let me know down in the comments. And then while you're down there, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. You know how this whole stuff works. The like button, the subscribe button, the hype button. If you want to hype me up, that is totally fine too. And then I hope I'll see you with my next video. Until then, have an amazing rest of your day. Bye.